Gents, can't believe it's June. We are almost halfway through the year, but we've got a bumper outturn, I would say, full of fantastic whiskies. And one that really catches the eye is this set that we're releasing for our 40th anniversary year, where we've taken the Society code of bottles 1, 9, 8, and 3 to hark back to the year we were founded, 1983. But it's a great idea and also a fantastic selection of whiskies. So let's just talk about the 1983 collection first of all. Euan, what can you tell us about it?
So yeah, as you said, it's 4 different bottlings from each of the distillery numbers corresponding to the numbers 1983. The first one, I guess I'll start with Distillery 1, is part of our additional maturation program. A very interesting and unusual cask type. It's in a sweet wine cask from Bodegas Jimenez Spinola in Jerez. And they grow all their own Pedro Jimenez grapes, dry them all and make all the wine in-house, which is quite unusual because often Pedro Jimenez grapes or the must is imported from elsewhere. So yeah, this is quite a kind of muscat style of wine, lots of orangey notes, sweet, syrupy. It's worth also just mentioning bottle number 94.42 is also being released in this outturn, and it's from the same bodega, but it's a more traditional Pedro Jimenez style of wine, so much darker and sweeter. And yeah, it's quite a long additional maturation in this case, in that it was moved to the new cask from a first fill bourbon barrel at 5 years old and then bottled at 9 years old.
Yeah, and we've had the pleasure, Euan, have been out to visit the amazing bodega at Jimenez Espinola, and Laura and Jose Antonio who run it. And I mean, it's just a fabulous place, and it's such an education in terms of what you even think about when you talk about the Pedro Jimenez grape, because we may associate it with the sweeter, thicker, darker sherries and their influence on whiskey, but they really do. They show the Pedro Jimenez grape in such a variety of styles.
Yeah, there's you could go into so much detail on their range and their ethos and process, but effectively, yeah, it's a love story to the PX grape, and they show how diverse it can be by making all different types of wine, from a drier white wine right the way through to a bit more traditional PX style, but with everything else in between. I think we tried the last time we were there was the first Palo Cortado, or they believed it was the first Palo Cortado ever made from PX grapes. So some super exciting stuff happening at that bodega.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And, we've gone from 1.1 as our first ever bottling in 1983 to this 1.282 and the first number, obviously, in the 1983 collection. Julien, 9.274 brings us to the second digit in this set. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, obviously number 9 is one of the quintessential distilleries from Speyside, and in this case, it's a first fill barrel of great quality that has been used for a full term maturation of that cask. And I think we've mentioned this before, but this batch of distillery number 9 is ever so slightly peated, and it just underlines the aging of those casks. And even though it's 19 years old, it tastes slightly older than that. So it's really one to sip and enjoy.
And the number 8, Euan, we've not seen a lot from this distillery. So that's quite exciting to see something from this Speyside favourite as well.
Brilliant to see number 8 coming back again. And this one is pretty special. It's a full-term maturation in a PX sherry butt, and it comes directly from our own fillings program. Started back in 2015, or in fact, the program really started in late 2014. But this is a cask from the 15 fillings. What I really like about this is the style of spirit is very fruity, but there's also a sort of cereally edge to it, and it's quite full-bodied, so it goes really, really well in sherry wood. And a lot of the distillery's own releases, in fact, I think all of their own releases are 100% sherry matured. So this is a really interesting chance to get to try one at natural strength, full-term sherry butt maturation. Delicious stuff.
And when you talk about the Society's fillings program, Euan, tell us a wee bit more about that. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, so obviously between the years of 2004 and 2015, we were owned by the Glenmorangie Company. So we had access to a lot of really interesting, amazing casks from their stocks as the parent company. And then come late 2014, when we knew SMWS was going to become independent again, we started reaching out and building new contacts again across the industry. So while we would have been doing fillings prior to 2004, we didn't really have the need to do it from then until 2015. And this is would have been one of the earliest casks that the current spirits team commissioned for filling. So it's really exciting for me to see these casks coming through, having been part of the genesis of them as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And the last bottle in this set, Julien, is I guess just call it an Islay classic.
Yeah, indeed. It's one of those really delicious Islay malts that is lower to medium in the level of peat. And this is a very, very elegant spirit with a light peated, floral, and ashy type of palette and range of flavors. So this is one that many will be looking forward to. It has the old and dignified flavor profile that's been assigned to it, and that's nonetheless because it has achieved a very, very ripe type of profile with very exotic tropical fruits that permeate through the peat and the light smoke, additionally to some of the delicious coastal characteristics that we're used to from this distillery. So this is again a full-term maturation in a second fill bourbon hogshead, which provides a slightly slower, more paced maturation than the bourbon, not by much, but still it's slightly smoother.
And we will be featuring the 1983 collection in the June issue of Unfiltered, with more information on it and more information about the Society's unique coding system, which started off with 1.1, and here we are 40 years later with this collection. And you've just been talking about 3.348, so the 348th cask that we've released from Distillery 3 on Islay. So dig into Unfiltered for more of this, and take a look at the photography that we've done of the 1983 collection. That they're beautiful bottles with the really, really stunning design. So it'll make a fantastic set for anyone out there who's lucky enough to get their hands on them. And also a nice wee video from Logan at Queen Street going through the range as well. So look out for that online to get everything you need to know about 1983. Just really, really good stuff. Let's move on, Euan. We've got a new release in our small batch blended malt series. What number are we up to here? 20, something like that?
Yeah, this is batch 20. And when was the first batch? I think it was 2016, maybe
2017.
So yeah, in the last 5 years, we've released a big range of different flavors and wood types, always trying to create something different. And here we are with batch 20, which is called Whiskey Baba. So I think the tasting panel were referencing a famous dessert, which is normally made with rum, a rum baba. And the reason for that is probably best explained by the cask types that we used here, which were very unusual. So the whiskey initially was matured in bourbon wood, but then moved into these casks for a period of around, I think it was 28 months before they were blended and bottled. So the casks are, the second batch of casks are made from French oak, and curiously, they were used for their first filling to mature Jamaican rum in France, in an area of quite high humidity, in the Cognac region. So also just to note, there's a couple of other interesting expressions coming out from these cask types as well in this outturn, number 6.67 and 36.208. So you can get a kind of smaller, different snapshot of what these casks are doing outside of the batch as well, if that's of interest. Yeah, so you can expect fresh kind of stone fruit, really nice flavors from the Speyside malts, but then you've got a bit more tropical, rum, funky kind of spices, vanilla, from the French oak, and the little hint of the estery Jamaican rum that had been in there previously. So yeah, this is our first rum experiment in this range, and well worth trying out. It's also worth noting that this, we decided that this one showed really well at natural strength. So rather than the usual 50% ABV, we just left it at the normal strength, but only because we can.
Yeah, and this has already picked up a double gold award in the San Francisco Wine and Spirits competition. So it's already getting accolades. I've not had a chance to try it yet, but clearly the judges already impressed with this. So looking forward to getting a taste.
Yeah, that's amazing to get that kind of accolade.
Yeah,
and I think we may have entered into a few other competitions. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's really good to get that kind of global recognition.
Yeah, definitely. Julien, a couple of interesting worm tub distilleries with big sherry influence coming out in the June Outturn, 48.160 and 44.176.
Yeah, the worm tub distillates are not the majority of what's been made in the Scotch industry these days. There's somewhere, I think, between 16 and 18 distilleries using them at this point. And this pair, I think, helps showcase the type of variation you can get in these distillates. So we can start with 48.160, which is on the lighter side of things where the distillate goes. It's still oily, a bit nutty, but it's quite clean and fresh as a distillate when you have it in a bourbon barrel. But here it's assorted with a first fill American Oak Oloroso hogshead, which helps it gather quite a bit of smooth vanilla, and then quite a heavy head of sherry with, dried fruits and all the influences you would normally expect from this type of cask. So it's a really nice balance of an oilier distillate and a sherry cask. Whereas we can then go on to 44.176, which is, on the sort of heavier side of the worm tub distillates. And this has been assorted with a PX American oak casks, which makes it, again, slightly smoother and adds quite a bit of rich darkness to this cask, which at 12 years old is still a quite heavy expression. 16 years old is still a very, very heavy expression. So, you get two different expressions from worm-tub distillates and very different experiences.
Yeah, and another deep, rich and dried fruits from distillery 80 also. Good name on this one, Fruit Detonation. Tell us about this one, Euan.
I love it when a name just completely nails something in that kind of succinct way. Two words, you know exactly what you're going to get. So Distillery 80 is quite an interesting setup. It uses purifiers on the spirit stills, which just means more reflux. So kind of more the spirit condenses and falls back down and is re-distilled effectively. And more copper contact, which gives you a kind of cleaner, lighter spirit in theory. But then they're also using a cloudy wort, which can result in a heavier, oilier, maybe nuttier, more cereal-like spirit. So it's a great example of how the nuances in each distillery and how they run their stills and the little changes along the way can really make a difference. This one is additionally matured in Spanish oak Oloroso, which is a very good match for the spirit because it kind of brings out the spicy, the sort of cinnamon, nutmeg, and also the nutty, maybe toasted almonds, those kinds of flavors as well as all the fruity stuff that obviously the name alludes to. But I think it's quite interesting to think about it from that spirit point of view, the original starting point, the Spanish oak, the Oloroso, all these things converge to create something really delicious.
Yeah, sounds magic. And Julien, a couple of examples of non-Scotch whiskies that we've got coming out in June. We're heading to Taiwan for one, and across the Pacific to Seattle for another.
Yeah, this is an interesting couple of casks, and I jumped on the opportunity to talk about them, seeing that I mentioned younger type of distillates and younger whiskies in this month's Unfiltered. So one of the things I was referencing to was the tropical style of maturation, and Distillery 138 provides an excellent example of that, being relatively close to the equator. They have a climate that is as different from Scotland as you can get. So you're looking at a massive Angel share, and you're also looking here at a first fill bourbon barrel. So they manage quite a bit of extraction in those 4 years. So it's a relatively dark whiskey. And, you have very different flavor development in those regions than Scotland, because you lose a lot of alcohol much faster. Whatever is extracted from the wood finds itself in higher concentration quickly. So it's really one to look forward to, I think, especially at that age. And then we can move on to 143.3. We go back up north to Seattle, just across the Pacific Ocean, and this is a fully matured whiskey in a first fill barrel that has a number 2 char. So it's a medium char in effect. So this whiskey uses Great Western pale malts. So for context, Great Western maltings are in Vancouver, and they produce this malt, which is specifically normally used by brewers to create beers that are on the sweet, malty, and biscuity style of things. So imagine that a whiskey is made with this malt, impacting those flavors to the wort, and see what happens when that gets distilled, what gets through the still, what doesn't. I think this is a really interesting experiment to discover here.
Yeah, and as you say, Julien, the 138.16 is 4 years old. The 143.3 is 3 years old, and you've got a very interesting feature again in the June Unfiltered members magazine, looking at the kind of history of the society's releases of young whiskies and why we've done it, and really why it's not always about age, and it's worth exploring these younger whiskies. So a couple of really good examples there. Also non-Scotch coming out this month. Euan, we've got a rye and also an interesting looking rum.
We can continue the globe trotting odyssey that we're on for this Outturn, going across from Seattle to Chicago, where we find RW 1.8. So this is a rye whiskey, quite a high rye mash bill, so that's 70% rye, 20% corn, and 10% barley. And interestingly, this distillery swaps around the percentages of rye and corn for their bourbon variant that we've released a few of recently, and I think we've got a few coming up still as well. They use a wine yeast for fermentation, which obviously creates a lot of different flavors to a standard distiller's yeast in Scotland. I'm not actually sure what particular wine yeast this is, but again, it's kind of like a hallmark of that distillery that they've gone to the nth degree to find the exact yeast that they want to work with to get the flavors right. And then the cask is quite interesting as well. It is a 30 US gallon cask, which is about 125 litres. In Scotland, we would refer to that as a quarter cask. And it's been charred to a number 3 level. So kind of medium to high char, 5 years old. And that smaller cask size gives a very intense maturation because there's a lot more spirit to wood contact. This gives classic sort of rye, peppery spiciness, but there's a lot of mentholic eucalyptus kind of notes in there, and then some really nice confectionery sweetness, marshmallows, things like that. So this is an absolute cracker. And then we can head over to Jamaica from Chicago to R11.16. Really interesting backstory. This has been on a journey itself. So this cask was matured in Jamaica for 3 years and then was brought over to Scotland, matured for a further 5, then moved from the bourbon barrel that it had originally been in into a second fill Oloroso hogshead. So it's quite unusual to see rum matured in a sherry cask, and this second fill is not too intense. It just adds some nice depth and kind of rum and raisiny character to the spirit. So yeah, a really well-traveled cask for a well-traveled Outturn.
And another good name for that one, R11.16 caused a rumpus. Very good, whoever came up with that one. So, and for fans of a more peated or heavily peated style, Julien, we can bring them back to Scotland, give them a big blast of proper Scottish whiskey.
Yeah, if you like to recover from your travels, especially with the festival season going on right now, we can look forward to 2 different things on the Outturn. Well, more than that, but 53.455 to start with, which is one of our classic from Islay, and this is not quite as classic as usual, given that it's been matured in a first fill bourbon hogshead and it has 11 years of age, and this has achieved a really lovely balance between the oak and the smoke. And there's also all the coastal and rock pooly, campfirey on the beach things that you would expect from Distillery 53 in general. They're all there, but they're just a bit more sweetness to it. So you'll find quite industrial things in there, like freshly tarred roads, a bit of a grubby iodine oily character, and you'll find some seafood and foodie elements too as well in there. And this is just to get you started, because then there's a true monster of peat that comes in with 16.95, which kind of inspired this sort of Highlands and Islay pairing here. This one has a massive smoke, and it's basically more on the barbecue side of things, with smoky ambers, dark berry juice, smoked meats, brisket, and so on. You name it. If it's on a barbecue, it's probably in there.
Fantastic. It's a nice selection, but there's a lot more in this Outturn. I'm just looking through the list, and there's some phenomenal stuff there which we've not mentioned, but definitely worth taking a look at. There's how old is that grain? 32-year-old grain in there, and there's a Vaults Collection bottling coming out at some point in June, 70.48, which is a 33-year-old Highland whiskey, Espresso Romano. So look out for that one as well. But plenty to choose from the 1983 bottlings right through to some globe-trotting drams around there. So, gents, as always, thank you for your time, and look forward to catching up for a dram.
Cheers, Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.